This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 518, Drupal Canvas. On today's show, we're talking about Drupal Canvas, what it is, and when we can use it, with our guest, Lauri Timmanee. We'll also cover Starshot Demo Design System as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today, our guest is Lauri Timmanee. Lauri works at Acquia as a product manager. He's managing Acquia Source and Drupal Canvas. He's been actively contributing to Drupal since 2013 and has been a core committer since 2017. He has contributed to Drupal 8, the Umami demo, Claro, CK Editor 5, single directory components, Drupal CMS, and more. Lauri, welcome back to the show and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Very excited to be back to talk about Drupal Canvas, which was called Experience Builder since we last talked about it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's exciting.
New name, new tool. It's all good. It's gonna be a good show. For those of you that don't know, I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, and today my co-host is Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development.
Happy to be here. Excited to learn what's changed in the last I think it's been about a year, and learn when it's coming out.
Before we get into our primary topic, let's talk about our module of the week. To do that, we're going to turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a principal solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules, recipes, and yes, even a theme of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted to try out Canvas, previously known as Experience Builder, with a fully built-out design system? There's a Drupal theme for that. It's called Starshot Demo Design System, and it was created in July of 2024 by longtime Drupalist Kristen Pohl of Salsa Digital, and it has a 1.0.6 version available, which supports Drupal 10 and 11. It is actively maintained and has both security and test coverage. And for documentation, there's a multi-page write-up of the Starshot Demo Design System, also known as SDDS, including contribution and development guides. It does have 34 open issues, 3 of which are active bugs, and it is officially in use by 79 sites, according to Drupal.org, although I suspect most, if not all of those, are sort of local development sites. Now, some of our users may have already tried out the pre-release demo of Canvas that Fennoproxima posted on GitHub. That actually has the Starshot Demo Design System, or SDDS, baked in. So even if you have watched a demo video of Canvas, you've probably seen SDDS in action. Now, SDDS is itself built on Civic Theme, a Drupal theme built to act as a component-based atomic design system. As such, Civic Theme includes a rich component library built from published Figma and Storybook UI kits. And because some of the early builds for SDDS were for GovCMS, the Australian Whole of Government CMS project, it is accessible with WCAG 2.2 compliance out of the box. While the official purpose of SDDS is providing a platform to use for demos in Dries notes and other presentations to illustrate the progress being made on Canvas, I think it's also safe to say that testing the latest features of Canvas with a fully realized design system has also helped to identify issues in Canvas itself. That means the products of all the work that has gone into SDDS will include a more production-ready and stable release when that gets tagged, hopefully in time for Vienna. So let's talk about the Starshot Demo Design System.
I
Oh
have
boy.
I have one question. I opened it up and I noticed there's a Webpack folder. So is this a move in the direction of allowing themes where you can have a build process included in that?
I don't think the SDDS, or Starshot Demo Design System, is supposed to make any opinions about sort of the technology behind it. It's really what we always focused on that. I was involved in building that with Kristen as well from the Canvas side of things. The focus was how do we actually present component-based design systems that highlight the power of Canvas. And it was like, I completely leave it up to you how you want to build this. Use, whatever tools you want to use. And they then decided that they would be using the set of tools that Gov CMS. I'm now blanking out what is the name of the theme. What is the name of the theme that is built on top of
The civic,
Civic theme.
Civic theme?
civic theme.
Yeah. So essentially, they decided to just use a tech stack the Civic theme is using. It's not really saying that okay, this is better than another way of doing it. It's just one way of doing it. And I think in a moment we're going to talk about there's also a Drupal CMS design system called Mercury that is being built, which does use actually a build step as well, but it's a different set of tools that is being used in there.
Okay.
So one thing that I always struggle with, especially with things that are very visual, is the lack of visuals when you're looking at like the kind of like the module page, right? So like I guess from my like, you know, small brain thinking here, I'm kind of like, oh, it's a design system, so I should be able to see like components and like how those things kind of go together and like what I might be able to build with this. And I've clicked on a couple of links. I've gone down a few of the module pages, rabbit holes, if you will, and like, you know, I'm still trying to struggle. I'm still struggling to figure out like what I get, like what's a good what components am I going to be able to build with. So, Martin, any insight into that?
So I think if you go to the Civic theme
Mm,
project,
mm.
on there it has links to the Figma UI kit as well as there's links to UI kits in GitHub and Storybook. So those are probably good places if you want to do kind of a visual browse. That project page also has links to example sites that will also give you a bit of a feel for, how that looks when it's implemented for, I think it's got a default one, not exactly sure what that one is, but also government, higher education, and corporate sites. You can sort of see how
Oh,
that
okay.
design system looks applied to kind of different verticals or use cases.
Yeah. So if you get
I
into
found
the
it.
Figma, you can kind of see color schemes and
There's also
different
a storybook link.
different different stuff. Yeah, okay. All right, that makes sense. Figma.
Okay, cool.
Figma's not always the easiest thing to use, but yeah, you can definitely get a flavor of what the goal is here, which is nice.
I
And
think it's
so,
maybe worth mentioning while we're talking about Civic theme. One thing that occurred to me as I was looking at the Starshot Demo Design System is if you were in the early stages of building a site that you figure is going to launch a few months or even a year from now, and you really want to use Experience Builder as kind of the layout engine within that, or sorry, excuse me, Canvas as a layout engine within that, then maybe starting with Civic theme as your base theme is a good approach because there's a whole team that's sort of working on the ongoing process of making sure that there's a layer to help Canvas run on top of Civic theme, and so that could be a good solution. Particularly if you don't have the resources to kind of do all of that integration with more of a custom theme yourself.
so
Yeah, and
is
SDDS is a great example of how you would implement one of those themes yourself, because that's an
yep.
implementation of Civic theme.
And that was actually going to be my question. So uh, what's the long term goal for the Starshot demo design system? Is it really just a kind of interim, easy way to test Canvas and Starshot, or is it meant to be kind of like a long term, kind of like what Umami was, but for Starshot?
So the SDDS was built in mind of just really creating different kinds of demos with it.
Okay,
It is a great way to test Canvas and to see how you would implement a design system, but it was not necessarily implemented to act as a starting point as such. I believe that probably there will be starting point themes. Civic theme might be one of those. Mercury, another one that is being built. So there will be themes that essentially then fill that gap as well. But they are potentially more generic in the nature that hey, they are designed to be extended and built on top of instead of being just working as this. We will be using SDDS going forward to do demos, and I guess that's one way of getting a visual is watching the Dries note. If you watch any of the videos or where Drupal Canvas is being shown there, you would see SDDS. All of those were powered by it.
very cool.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Martin, as usual, very topical, and we appreciate you bringing us this wonderful module of the week. If folks wanted to connect or suggest a module of the week, how could they go about doing that?
We are always happy to talk about interesting candidates for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social channels.
Great. See you next week, Martin.
See you then.
Next week.
Okay, Lauri. So Drupal Canvas, previously known as Experience Builder, just in case anybody hasn't been paying attention or is just coming into this, like, hey, what is this thing? What is it? What does it do?
What does Drupal Canvas do? It is a it started as a page builder project, and then essentially from there we figured, okay, it's page building is actually a kind of complicated topic because that's really just how you put together that's the end stage, the last stage of the delivery of like building something that you actually ship. And essentially it became experience builder from there because it's really about all of, what it takes to build an experience. And it's so that means building components, building the whole visual design of your site. How do we make that as easy as possible? Because we realize that there's a lot of points of friction in there today, and we wanted to create this new experience then for building sites. And ultimately, now it became then Drupal Canvas. Lately, that was not really something we wanted to do. It was sort of forced upon us due to a legal issue. But on the bright side, it actually does open up the horizon to even broadening what it actually means that it can do because of especially now with AI being this hot topic, we've been looking into, okay, how do we actually adopt AI as part of this process? And it's very interesting to see there's a lot of opportunity in there because of with Drupal Canvas, we've had to re-architect how the sort of admin interface is being built.
Hmm.
It's being built with React instead of purely being based on PHP. That new architecture that we now have on Drupal Canvas actually provides a lot of opportunity to add new kinds of things on top of it. And I think that Drupal Canvas as a name is actually now great because it sort of allows us to go any direction that we want to.
Feels very creative, right? It feels very like, hey, you can just paint your pages and you can add whatever you want. It harkens me back to, like, I don't know if this is going to be either a dated reference or not a widely known reference, but Bob Ross. Like, I'm just imagining building my Drupal pages now with happy little trees.
So when will I see that the original owner of the Canvas namespace in the Drupal project turn that over to this project. When will that repository kind of switch take place? Because there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of code. There's a lot of references. Who's working on that? When can we expect that to be finished?
I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that it will be finished by the time that the episode gets out.
Okay, so
So if
next
you're
Monday.
listening
Fingers
to
crossed.
this, you too can go to drupal.org/project/canvas and hopefully find Drupal Canvas right there.
I'm sure you will find at least parts of Drupal Canvas in there if it is fully working because it's going to be very tight. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's a little bit unknown because it's not something we've really done before. So we don't fully grasp what all needs to be done, but we are planning to focus on that essentially exactly between when we are recording this and the next and when the episode is out. So I guess how that all works out, you listening this will you're able to find it out by just going to check
I mean,
Drupal
I mean
Canvas.
the there's two pieces to this. One is all of the issues and stuff moving over, which I'm sure the Drupal.org team might help with. But I mean, you could always just create Canvas as a stub module and then have a sub module that's called Experience Builder, and just have
Yeah.
Canvas depend on that, and then take your time migrating stuff to the correct namespace.
We're we're trying to take the approach where we go just all in, just do everything at once.
Yeah,
And the
Well, that's
reason
so
is
much
that
work.
because of we were supposed to release a beta at the end of July. We actually completed all of the beta blockers by that time, but then sort of this new issue was discovered just around that time. And because of that, we're really anxious to release that beta release so that we can actually get broader adoption of Canvas. And what we know is
Makes
that
sense.
the more we can change before, the less pain it causes
I'm,
up down the road
Yeah,
for
I'm a
us.
big fan of
absolutely.
ripping the Band-Aid off. That's my preferred method of doing things. So I can understand that.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to where like where did the idea of Drupal Canvas come from, right? So like I know a lot of other systems out there have kind of this similar sort of page builder sort of canvas idea, right? And Drupal had still has a layout builder, has paragraphs, which have both been used for this same sort of task. But I'm wondering where the idea came from, or is it really just like an evolution of some of these other things?
Yeah, I don't think it really is an original idea. If you think about layout builder and Drupal core, we sort of tried to solve that in there. So we sort of were aware of the problem, but we didn't quite fully grasp all of the things that would have to be fixed. Where I became aware of this was in 2023. I shifted roles from being a framework manager for Drupal core to being a product manager, and that's when I started sort of figuring out, okay, so what that whole problem space was about, and started getting a sense on like what all of the initiatives that were in motion, like what is the value that they are delivering to our users. That was automatic updates, project browser, and so on. And I actually talked to first, I think like 15, 20 different agency leaders, developers, site builders. I tried to get sort of the whole spectrum represented there. And what was interesting was I was really trying to learn about what like how can I help them best with the initiatives that I sort of have in motion right now. What's interesting was that everyone was sort of steering the conversation towards all sorts of site building and page building issues that they were facing. And then I went to Pittsburgh later that year. I think it was in June, and that's when I sort of went in and talked to even broader set of people because obviously at DrupalCon it's easy to do conversation at scale, and just realized that this is a massive problem. At that point, I was also a little bit more focused around page building because of I had
Yeah,
sort of heard about that. I wanted to dig deeper into that and just realized that hey, this is a problem that everyone is concerned about. This is something that causes friction to literally every agency out there. We're essentially different agencies are wasting so much investment in building their own solutions around this that this is a huge opportunity for us to solve this. And then later in the year, this was announced as an initiative in DrupalCon Lil, based on just learning, okay, hey, this is something we have to do. We didn't have a full plan back then. We didn't know how we were going to make it happen. I think we didn't fully understand the scope back then. I think it was only until like maybe January the following year when it was like, okay, this is a like that's when we had done competitive analysis, sort of graphs, because I had to learn what this problem space is. I actually have built page builders two times to a customer when I was working in an agency. Like I've worked on it myself,
okay.
but I was so disconnected being a framework manager from that I didn't really, you know, have that in my head, and I couldn't immediately say that hey, that's the problem we have to go solve first. So
Yeah.
it took me
Right.
a half a year to learn, okay, what does this mean? What are our competitors doing? What is actually the expectation around that? And I think in January we realized that hey, the gap between what we have is that hey, we our solution is here, and then the expectation is going to be much higher than that if we want to compete. People have agencies have been solving that gap. Like where agencies are like they're getting pretty close to where the competition is. Obviously, there's a gap in terms of the experience. Our solutions are really powerful, but it's in the experiences where we've always been lacking a bit more. And
And
that was where, okay, how do we actually now not only build a solution that is powerful, but has the experience that not only competes in 2024, 2025, but also serves us going forward. And that's when we realized, hey, the scope of this is massive. And so
and
we oh,
and was one of those it sounds like one of those requirements too is to make it so that site builders can interact with it, right? Because
yeah,
if it's a solution that only big agencies can accomplish,
yeah,
that doesn't help with the adoption of the lower end of the market.
yeah. The goal was essentially set where a site builder, designer, and content creator, even if they've never used Drupal before, they should be successful with this product.
Yeah. So that I mean that feels like the MVP to me because like similarly to you, Larry, like in the past I built something, a page layout tool with paragraphs very early on for a large insurance company. And like that was very much like, okay, like here's the component, which is just a paragraph that you kind of drag out onto the page and put it where you want. And like there are all these, downs that kind of let you to configure it, right? And then, more recently, the next iteration for another client there was Layout Builder, which was great. But like ultimately using Drupal Canvas, seeing demos, seeing Dree's notes, I'm like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And this has to be, so fluid for content creators so that they can just pull out components and build these pages without a lot of effort. So follow-up question here, I think, is and this is kind of like not in our list of questions, but like a lot of people, like to me, I always liken the page building experience to like Squarespace, right? If you've ever used Squarespace, it's like super super easy, maybe not as intuitive, but like almost anybody could go in there and build a page, right? I mean, in your thinking, is that where we're trying to get to? Where like, hey, you could install Drupal CMS and get in there and start building pages in this kind of like component, very easy to use sort of manner.
Yeah, that's definitely the future that we want to head towards. We have an example of that, which is the first example where we're trying to lower the bar. Is we have code components in Drupal Canvas where you can actually create components using a built-in browser code editor,
Yeah,
which now you don't actually need to have an IDE or development environment to be able to build those components in there.
mm,
That's just the first step because you have to start somewhere. But that's the follow-up step there. We will be adding more visual tools where even less technical user would be able to accomplish those things.
yeah,
Obviously, we have to lean into what is our strength. We are open source product, and the strength I believe that open source products is that you can build great environments for developers, site builders, and content creators to collaborate on. Because if
yeah.
you can build a solution where developers have much more extensibility than you would have on a traditional proprietary solution. And I think that's the strength that we need to lean onto is okay, how do we not just create a solution that is great for site builders and content creators, but one where actually developers can get a lot of value as well, where they can actually extend the
And
tool
it's
as well.
it
I'm
and
not,
it
I'm not necessarily talking about extensibility in terms of the interface so much, more integrations and actual additional capabilities you need to add in
Yeah,
there.
that's really where it levels up, right? Because with something like Squarespace, you're restricted to their set of predefined components, their set of pre-existing integrations, right? If you want to build, as you said, your own components, or you want to do your own integration, if you have like an ERP system or a third-party system you need to integrate with, like Drupal provides a great platform, a great framework for that, right? So I mean, I think that's kind of where we rise above kind of
Yep.
those mainstream solutions. And it's funny because I was just at Drupal GovCon and I was having a conversation with somebody and I'm like, Squarespace is kind of eating our lunch right now in the like page layout. And they're like, no, 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 like we're not competing with them. And I've heard that quite a bit when I bring up Squarespace. It's like people don't really get it as far as like,
Yep.
they have the ease factor. They have the person that doesn't necessarily need a super advanced site can go there and for a couple $100 get a website that is really easy to build, right? But like I would like to see something similar to Drupal because that opens the gates for those intro users to get familiar and then come into the ecosystem. And I think Drupal Canvas is a great way for
Yep.
that to get started. Nick's muted and he's talking. He's going to make a really good point. I can see it in his
Yeah.
face, but
So, and Drupal does have a huge advantage over Squarespace, right? And that is the information architecture, right? We all know that the deployment, the
yep,
stability, and if Squarespace could, they would have already built that on their system, right? So we have that advantage. We're trying to match the other end of the market, which is the page building experience.
Yep.
That being said, Squarespace does have a pretty big limitation when it comes to page building. And I'm curious, Lowry, if Canvas has the same limitation or if we found a solution to it. And that limitation is that because of the flexibility that you have in Squarespace or Wix or any of these page builders, each page is kind of its own page. Like keeping consistency or updating an existing component to look the same across multiple pages, especially when you get past 20 pages. If you have a page site that has 30, 40 pages and you decide your CTA wants to change, that can be pretty gnarly. So, does Canvas have that same kind of limitation where each page is gonna kinda be one off, or is it still using components in such a way that if you decide to do kind of a bulk update to something, you can pretty easily do that?
So we are supporting both approaches in with Drupal Canvas, and the reason being, part of the research that I did was that actually because Drupal hasn't been very good with the sort of fully flexible solution, I've seen a lot of site builds where essentially the site builders and developers have tried to accomplish that very flexible type of experience by just trying to jank it in the tools that they are provided with. And that essentially because of they're not designed to build that type of experience. It actually leads into fairly complicated user experience. Like imagine building a fully baked out page builder in paragraphs. Like you can imagine paragraphs is not necessarily designed to for that. There's great use cases for that, but just doing like a Squarespace level of flexibility in there is where you sort of go outside of what is possible. And that's where with Drupal Canvas we have where you can create pages essentially using your components. Components are already where you can control centrally how those components look like. So you can manage the CSS, essentially how they look like. You can update them centrally. The pages themselves are flexible and don't necessarily have any structure to them. The second way in which you can use those same components in Drupal Canvas is you can create templates. For example, you can create either page template, which is your header and footer. So that's where you use the same components, but and you want the header to be the same across your whole site. Very similar to block layout in Drupal. But instead of having
Okay.
sort of a different building blocks in there, you're using those same components in there. Now, other form of template that we have is you can create content templates, which is what you could use to display your content types or taxonomy, for example. And that's where you can create a template where it essentially cascades across all of the nodes that you have in a single content type. And then you can update that template centrally for those.
So
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 that's
it's
how you can
similar
get
to
that scale.
it's similar to Layout Builder where you can have, like, a custom template per entity or per bundle, right? So this content type has one layout, or you could say, "Hey, this one each time I create a page, I create a custom layout." Similar to
Yeah,
that,
it's
or
similar with the exception that Canvas doesn't provide right now the per page overrides for your
oh,
content type. So you would use pages for that use case. Because
okay.
essentially when we looked at how a lot of I I talked to over 50 people when we did research on the design. I like it was very hands-on. Like they would show me, okay, hey, this is how we built sites in here. And what we saw was that there was actually very few use cases where they would actually have like a fully built out template where they would do one-off overrides in there. It was more like, okay, they maybe want to provide a starting point in there, or that they just want to have that consistent layout across all of the
Yeah.
pages.
That's
Hmm.
that's typically what I've experienced as well, where you have like, hey, the structured content pages, like, hey, my blog post page is always going to be like kind of like structured in this way. And then you have kind of I used to call them the flexible layout pages where like, hey, you can do pretty much whatever you want here. Like go for it. Go to town. I will say recently I was looking at Layout Builder and the ability to use kind of a flexible template page, but have and this would be a different content type, but like have that be like templated where it's like, hey, these are the blocks that are on this page and you can edit those blocks, and if you really want to maybe move them around, but you can't, like they have to be on this page, right? And
Yeah,
there are some modules out there that can help with
Yeah.
that. So
yeah.
yeah, I think you're right on with the idea of like, hey, here's your flexible page that you can like build a layout page or a landing page with, get go nuts, and then here's like your structured content for your resources, for your blog posts,
Yep.
for your events, that sort of thing.
Another variation of that we discovered is sort of a hybrid, which is
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
supported initially, but we will have that in future. Where very common in the use case of products, for example, where
Yep.
if you're selling bicycles, for example, you want to have like the SKUs, the name, price, maybe the like different size options that you have,
Yeah.
images on the top, and you want to have a consistent layout for how the product is laid out. But then maybe after that, what follows is more like you tell a story about that bicycle. It's not really the specs anymore at that point, and that's where it's really marketing's responsibility to come up with what that content is.
Yep.
And if it's a race bike or if it's a mountain bike, the story and the way that you tell it might be quite different. If it's
Right.
your flagship
Yeah.
bicycle, you might actually put much more effort into that product. Whereas if it's sort of a bicycle that very few people purchase and you don't want to put any marketing effort into that, maybe it's a very simple
Yeah.
page at
Yeah.
that point. And so that's something
Makes
we
sense.
want to support eventually, is where you can do those hybrid pages as well.
Hmm.
Is the idea with
Interesting.
those hybrid pages that you'd have like almost like a canvas field where it was like, hey, here's all your fielded data up top, and then the canvas field kind of allows you to drop in
Pretty
components?
much. But
Yeah.
visually, you
You,
don't
you,
really have to think about a field, because if you're just building a template and saying that, hey, here's a slot where you can place components,
Right.
and behind the scenes we create a field for that. But as a user, you don't really have to know about
Sure.
that.
you found that solution pretty quick, John. I'm impressed. it,
I mean,
it took it took a fair amount of discussion to come up with the actual nuts and bolts solution for that, but yeah, pretty
it's
impressive.
something that I've played with before in the past.
Yeah,
It's a it when you start working with marketing teams, man, they want those pages to
yeah,
do a lot of different things, and sometimes and I will say it's one of those things that I kind of implemented a little bit with like paragraphs. Like back in the day, it was like, here, this is all like the static stuff that you have to fill out, and then here you can drop whatever paragraph you want in here to
yep,
build out the. Very similarly, Laurie's right. It was
Yep.
actually for a e-commerce site. So
And this is actually
so
a use case where Power Graphs is really good at, like when you don't have to like
yeah,
do full on like really complex pages. For this use case, it works really well.
yeah.
So, and that's what we wanted to do, is look at, hey, we have Power Graphs and Layout Builder that have their pain points, but also there are some things that they are really good at,
Mhm.
obviously, because they are getting a lot of adoption. So we don't want to be arrogant. We want to learn about what those use cases are where they work really well. And then, okay, how do we essentially provide a similar experience or better than that for those use
It's
cases?
it's interesting to me because you said, that earlier on you said you had built various solutions for clients in agency life a couple of times. They used a couple of different things, and it got me thinking of like, man, once Drupal Canvas is kind of like out and kind of incorporates a lot of these different ways of using it, the number of people that are going to kind of maybe migrate to it or start using it or be involved in it is going to kind of exponentially grow, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the mission, is to build a platform that ideally multiple existing ecosystems can, collaborate on now. So we could get folks from Power Graphs, from Layout Builder, and now built one
Yeah,
cohesive platform.
that's awesome.
so getting back to kind of the initial feature set, will Canvas itself launch with existing components and building blocks, or will there be a kind of a sibling module that you can install, or how will the actual components themselves come into play?
So Canvas itself is not shipping any components. We actually removed all of our default components this very recently, probably a few weeks ago. We will have components in future. We will call them elements. Those are sort of built in, because they're built in. They're not really components. Components are supposed to be the ones that you all built in your sites. And so we will have elements in future, but that's not in the initial scope for the project. But how
Okay.
components can be fed into Canvas is, you can either use code components inside the interface of Drupal Canvas, or you can build SDC components. And if you
Okay.
create an SDC component, it automatically becomes available in Drupal Canvas.
Oh,
There's going to be a new property in SDCs where you can indicate if you don't want them to appear in there.
okay.
But right now, that's going to be there in 11.3, I think.
Wait,
Until then, yeah, all of their SDCs are automatically in there. There's a UI that we provide where you can turn off components that you don't want to be in
so
there.
Oh, thank God,
well,
because sorry, John. That's one of the biggest pain points of Layout Builder, is that you have to like write so much code to be like, okay, in this case, don't show the 14,000 blocks that Drupal core
there's a
provides.
module that lets you just shut up only show certain
Well,
blocks in
yeah,
Layout
at this
Builder.
point, at this point, there's a module, but if you wanna customize further, you usually you have to have a custom module that customizes a lot of layout builder. So having an interface to be like now is that global? Is it, like, either it's on or off for all instances of Canvas,
It's
or is it per slot?
it is on or off. We are looking into per slot restrictions as well, and that's an SDC level capability we would be adding,
Yeah.
where the SDC itself could say that, hey, this slot can accept these components in here.
Okay.
So it would not be in this universal interface.
Okay. Interesting.
And that's
So
one of the big mindset shifts for Drupal Canvas is that we're really trying to think the front end developer as a key persona using this.
Okay.
It is sort of the site builder can use what the front end developer has done, or the site builder might be doing the front end development themselves. But we're thinking, okay, in both scenarios where you have a site builder using predefined components, or you have a front end developer just you know or site builder building those components, how do we and which layer do we need with what information? And we're actually moving a lot more information to the components than what we've had before. In fact, like components really wasn't a concept in Drupal until like a few years ago, until SDC came about. And now Drupal Canvas is heavily using SDC and adding to that the SDC spec to have more capabilities, such as like slot restrictions. We're adding things like
Yeah.
variant support in there, and now the option to actually for the SDC author, whether it's site builders, one developer, to tell if that component is internal component. If it's an internal component, it means that none of the display builders. So we are collaborating with the UI suite folks as well, because that's another display building
Yeah.
solution. So we are collaborating with them, that the scheme that we're building around SDC is something that makes sense for both of us. And it's actually a great way for us to validate as well that the things that we're putting in there, that they're sort of universal needs, because that's a lower level API. So it's not just sort of hardwired to Drupal Canvas, because of, you know, there's other things that can consume those
so
components as
you
well.
you you actually said something that I wanna dig into a little bit because I don't know, it seemed a little concerning to me, and I wanna make sure I understood you correctly. So you said that you recently took out all of the default components from Drupal Canvas. So did they get moved to a submodule that you can enable, or are they just not there anymore?
They're in a sub module. So
Ah,
they are still
okay.
there.
Deleted. They're
You can
gone.
they're
You
Well,
can
gone.
never see them again.
no, that's terrible, Nick. That would definitely be a bad user experience. So they're moved to a submodule. That was
Yeah.
the answer. Okay. So
Yeah, the
you
idea being just that majority of scenarios, you actually don't want those module components to be there. They're great if you're just testing it out. They're great for that use case.
Yeah.
Actually, SDDS that was featured earlier, I think is even better, because it's even a more realistic and more full design
Yeah.
system solution.
so
But if you just want to test out a couple things, we're using them for our testing and things like that at the moment.
Okay.
so if
Makes sense.
you I'm just like going down the future path here, right? So like if you install Drupal CMS and it has Drupal Canvas installed, right? Or enabled, right? Is it also going to enable those default components so you could actually start building pages?
So Drupal CMS itself is going to be delivering this concept of site templates in Drupal CMS 2.0, and that's
Interesting.
where the site template is where you would be getting those components from going forward, and that way the components that you're getting, they're specific to the site
To the
template
site
that you want
template.
to.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
So
That
now
makes
maybe we can see how the different dots now are starting to connect.
yeah, we're starting to get a constellation.
Yeah.
The stars are connecting. You see what I did there? I
Yeah.
brought it back to Starshot. Never mind.
The
Continue.
Constellation brings me fun memories, because of the internal project name for a product that we were building in relation to Drupal Canvas is Acquia Source, which is what I'm product managing on, and kind of goes to the how as well, where we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to fund an effort that is this big? And we decided that we were going to build a SaaS solution that leverages Drupal Canvas. And essentially, we decided, okay, hey, the major stakeholders here are going to be our SaaS solution and Drupal CMS as the open source solution. Sort of there became a constellation of those two efforts around DrupalCon Portland, and we started building the two things at the same time. Acquia Source launched in July and has Drupal Canvas already. We're supporting it internally in there. And what's actually interesting about Acquia Source, why I see it aligns with Drupal CMS really nicely, is that it's built on top of the same building blocks. It's essentially powered by Drupal CMS,
Hmm.
and it's behind the scenes. So it's using Drupal. And what we actually allow folks to do there is you can export your Acquia Source site into a Drupal CMS site. And
Oh,
that's kind of where that
interesting.
Squarespace developer experience sort of all starts to connect together. Because if you want the Squarespace experience where, you want to start with something where your marketing team just sets up something quickly together, you can go to Acquia Source and it's a fully maintained SaaS platform.
Yep.
But if you run into a limitation with the SaaS, well, guess what? Now you can export that Acquia Source site into a Drupal CMS site. And as a developer, you can do all of the magic that you can do in Drupal CMS.
Or even like, my kind of vision there is that like you start with Acquia Source, right? And at some point down the road, you go, oh, we've outgrown this. We need to integrate with X system or Y system or whatever. Now you
Yeah,
can take that and bring it to an agency, bring it to a Drupal certified partner, and
exactly.
say, hey, I need to work. I need this to work differently. Can you help me with this? And you can, you're not starting all over again. You actually have this Acquia Source starting point basically to bring it into Drupal CMS, or I would imagine just Drupal itself if you really needed to, right?
Yeah.
So what's the pricing for Acquia Source then? If I have I have a couple of clients where they sometimes do like pop-up landing page sites, and if we could move those in Drupal, that'd be pretty beneficial. Do you have pricing for it, or is it just part of a bigger package that Acquia provides?
It is a part of a package where we would sell usually multiple sites because of it is really designed for situation where you have more than one site. It is much more affordable than Acquia's offering outside of it because it is targeting, a different space in the market. Yeah, I don't have specifics on that, but it is somewhere in between
It's always
Squarespace and where Acquia's current offerings are.
Nick's always asking
Okay.
those hard hitting questions.
I mean, asking the product manager how much the product costs is not super hard hitting, but I can understand why you wouldn't have those details readily available. But if there's any like documentation on that, we can put it in the show notes. Because like I said, I have a couple clients that may or may not be interested. Okay, so getting back to Canvas, you mentioned that the original beta was scheduled for July and was delayed for reasons outside of our control, where you're trying to get stuff moved over to the new Canvas namespace by the end of this week. When can we expect to be able to use Canvas on client projects in a reasonably and be reasonably sure that it's not gonna kind of fall apart under us because it's still too early?
So I guess first thing that I do want to mention, we are taking a very responsible approach, and we actually didn't want to tag the beta just because of that we knew the
Yeah, yeah,
rename
no,
coming up. I think
I
otherwise,
agree. I agree. That's a great decision. I 100% appreciate that. A few
yeah,
weeks delay is much preferable than the name changing under the hood
yeah.
in the
Uh,
middle of a release.
and Acquia Source is already using Drupal Canvas, so we are using it ourselves in production already. There's some things that we have to do slightly differently than to provide that stability in there, but otherwise, I think we are really close to getting a place where it is s- from stability perspective, where it's stable enough for you to use it in client project and it's not going to explode. I think where the real question is just when can I expect to have the right capabilities in place in there? Like it's not going to have
Yep.
even when we have the beta or when we have the stable release later this year out, it's not going to have all of the capabilities that people can expect to have from using layout builder or paragraphs. Because we're focused on a lot on the experience side of it to make sure that it's really easy to use.
So
Um, so those are
let me
following up, but yeah,
let me share the specific use case because I have a client right now that's pretty excited about it and wants to use it. And their specific use case is they want to provide it to an internal department for putting out their own blog. Because right now, all the blogs in that particular client go through one central editor, and they want to start increasing the amount of blog posts that go out for very specific products, and they want to put some of that in the hands of the individual departments, and they want to
yeah,
use Experience Builder for that, or Canvas for that.
yeah.
So, I we're if I'm realistic with the time frames, we're looking at prototyping that ideal like some sort of solution end of September, beginning of October, and launching some sort of feature for them probably end of November, beginning of December.
Yeah.
Is that something that we could even if the capabilities are maybe limited from what they will be long term, is that a realistic timeline, do you think, for a project on Canvas, external to Acquia source?
I think so. I think the September, October is sort of very tight, but you mentioned prototyping at that point, so I think that should be fine. We are targeting stable release for October, so we would have multiple
Okay,
beta releases by that time. So I would say that if you're not on a hard deadline where I have to start actually the implementation of this project on the last day of September, for example, if there's a flexibility to actually potentially wait few more weeks, then I think you're fine. And it's actually even like maybe you might be able to start even at that point because you don't necessarily have to expect to have everything fully polished
yeah,
by the time that you actually start it. You're launching at
yeah,
end of November, so that's when have had multiple releases on the stable already. So we're expecting
yeah.
that, yeah, 1.0, but we are going to have multiple releases then coming up. As you can see already, like whenever we've done releases before, we've been doing frequent releases. It's been a bit less now just because of the fact that we are sort of in this confusing state with the naming and all of that. But before that, we
Yeah.
we we were making pretty frequent releases before that.
Okay.
So
I mean, you guys kind of were like, "Hey, let's release a major feature, and oh, by the way, halfway through, we're going to change the name of it." Like you're
It
like,
wasn't even halfway through. It was like
you're
90%
piling
of the way
on,
through.
yeah, piling on. So a little uncertainty there is, I think,
Eh,
understood.
a fun fact, by the way, I don't know if you know this, Lowry, but every once in a while, Tim Hestenet puts out some stats on like test usage and things like that. And Core obviously uses the most tests on GitLab, but number two is always Experience Builder. Experience Builder is using a lot of GitLab CI minutes.
I'm sure you
yeah,
mean Drupal Canvas, Nick.
it is. I guess it is still called Experience Builder as we are talking. So
Yeah,
that's
and the historical
accurate.
reports will still be Experience Builder, but yeah.
Yeah, uh,
Got it.
it is. We have a big team working on this. We have what would I say that it's very hard because we have contractors and full-time employees. We have design, but I would say we have around 20 people or
Oh, wow.
probably 20 plus people working full-time on this. So it is
Uh,
a fairly significant effort that we're putting into this.
Yeah.
so thinking about Drupal Canvas, thinking about kind of the demos that I've seen, thinking about kind of the upgrade path for folks that are using Layout Builder and paragraphs. I'm wondering, A, is there an upgrade path? And B, what does it look like? I know that in early demos, you were able to pull in like dynamic components which were basically blocks. You could pull those into Drupal Canvas. Is that still the case? Because I imagine that could be a upgrade path from Layout Builder. But
Y yeah,
what does that look like?
you can still pull in blocks in Drupal Canvas. It's still a thing. I think the reason it's getting less attention now is because it's just we've consolidated everything under one list of components instead of trying to separate them. In terms of how the actual upgrade path, we're not going to have upgrade paths available at the point when we launch this. It's also better for us to focus on just getting the feature set right so that we can actually get people who are building new sites to get their feedback first.
Yep.
And then once we've proven the solution on that front, then we start focusing on migrations next. So we're going to focus first on closing the feature gap, and then after that, we will focus on migrations. What we are focused on is gradual adoption
Hmm.
of Drupal Canvas, where because it's a solution that you can essentially build your full site with.
Hmm.
The idea is that you don't have to build your full site with it. You should be able to just use, for example, if you want to use the Drupal Canvas pages, that's fine. Or if you want to enable it for specific content types, that's also fine. And then you can keep your existing things running on
So
what
it
whatever they are on.
yeah, so if I were running Drupal 11 or 10, Drupal 10 or 11 now, right? And I said, "Okay, I wanna move to Canvas." theoretically, I could stand it up next to whatever my current page builder is and start building new pages in it and maybe working on migrating or recreating those other pages in Canvas in
Yeah.
kind of like a structured, timeline sort of way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't have a high number of pages, maybe migration is not even worth it. Like a migration where it comes to play a
Yeah.
part is really when you have these much larger sites, and when you have a larger site, usually then also the feature set that you expect is a bit more complicated, which is also why it might not make sense in the very beginning. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. You might have a blog, for example, with a lot of content that doesn't actually have a lot of complex. So there are outliers to that.
Yeah.
I also imagine like a migration and Nick, you know a fair amount of migration, so you could probably chime in here, but like in my head, I'm trying to figure out how, like, if I had a site using paragraphs and I wanted to go to Canvas, like, how would I write that migration, right? Because it's basically like, hey, it's the Wild West of
Who
page
knows yet?
building, right?
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
feels to me like you'd just be like, we're gonna do a manual migration, just move pages one at a time, like as we recreate
Yeah.
them or update them.
We've talked about that conceptually already. It's a hard problem, of course, on the when you go to the like nuts and bolts level, but on conceptually we've thought about it where essentially one Drupal canvas slot represents one paragraphs field, essentially. So
Yeah,
now what you have to solve is okay, how could we allow paragraphs to be displayed in Drupal canvas? So instead of just showing
Yeah.
blocks, could paragraphs be a thing in there? We believe that it
interesting.
can. We haven't fully proven that it's possible, but like conceptually,
Yeah.
you could do
See,
that.
in my
Well,
head,
not not
I was saying like paragraph component to canvas component, and then just like mapping the fields and moving them
yeah.
over because you would know what the component was, so you could build a migration that way. But yeah, like
Yeah,
I feel like
you could.
that's a task.
Yeah, but you also have, not to confuse namespaces even more, but I'm not sure if you're aware of the Mercury editor, Lauri, the one that uses layout paragraphs that I think the Atten design group works on. I mean, that could be a way to see how to kind of map things into. But I I actually had a different question I wanted to ask. And again, I apologize. I guess today's the day I'm asking all the hard hitting questions, but I feel like Layout Builder kind of feels like it was, in some respects, a prototype of what Canvas is becoming, right? And Layout Builder is great. The sites that now that it's been around for quite some time, and we know like the use cases and the edges, there's no replacement for it, right? But there are it's been a few years and there are still some rough edges, and I'm curious if these are going to be rough edges in Canvas as well, or if it's something that's been planned for. And in particular, the three big ones that always catch me on, well, there's a few. There are four things that always catch me on Layout Builder. One is translation is a you have to plan a lot more for translation with Layout Builder. It's kind of like you make a decision whether they're going to be symmetrical or not in the beginning, and you're kind of stuck with that long term. How is translation going to work with Experience Builder?
So on 1.0, we are not going to have translation capability. Just point blank, that's not something we provide. But something we've learned from paragraphs and layout builders that translations can be painful, and we've learned about also this decision you have to make up front around symmetric and asymmetric translations, and we've designed the data model around being actually able to support both, and
Okay.
with the idea that actually you could even say that you could have one piece of content translated asymmetrically or symmetrically. You could leave it up to the content creator to decide how they want to translate it.
Okay.
And
Fair, fair
that
enough.
we can do essentially how we want that decision flow to work is something we can decide. Like that's just business logic we would apply on top of it. Like whether you want because you could say that, for example, all of the translations to a specific language must be symmetric.
Yeah.
That could be
Yeah.
a way in which you want to do it. Another way is which you say that, specific content type, for example, is always translated in a
Yeah.
specific way.
Or
So we can add all of
choose
those because the
individual.
data
Yeah.
model is flexible enough to be
Oh, nice.
able to accommodate both.
Okay. So the second set of problems, I attributed them to the content being serialized, but and I don't know how to particularly classify this, but Layout Builder almost feels like it's not Drupal in some respects. Things like views integration, or even as far as like sections or blocks don't know what section they're in. So like one of the strengths of Drupal is that content kind of knows where it is and where it's being rendered and how it's being rendered. And so if you need to make decisions based on that, you can, or if you need to query based on it, you can. Is that still a something to expect for Canvas, or is the data model such that you can interact with it the way you'd expect to out of the box?
So there are some ways in which you can interact with it. It's not necessarily the primary goal for that data, but we
Okay,
have made some efforts to improve how the data can be mapped. There was sort of data model was one of the big things that we've been going back and forth over the last year,
I
and
get it.
Catch, for example, from the Drupal core release managers, has been very involved in
Yes,
reminding us of all the sort of pain points that the previous solutions had to make sure that we don't fall into the same
yes.
pitfalls with
I
this.
was a
And
part. I was part of those issues too. I'm part of that voice. Okay, and then the final one, and this is almost one of the biggest issues, is that so for example, if you choose to do custom layouts in Layout Builder for a content type and you create one, even if you delete it, you can't remove that ever. Like it's just like there's no way to back out of that decision, period. So if you're making an experience builder page and you decide to modify that layout or structure somehow, is that something that you can control? Or is it like once you set it up, it's fixed in stone where the slots go and that's that? Or is it more flexible? I guess is the question.
I would say right now there are a lot of limitations in what kind of changes you can make after you've sort of first committed
Enter
to it.
content.
But
Yeah.
there we are looking what are the different ways in which you have to be able to modify things after the fact. So we will be adding more ways in future. Right now we are protecting some of the changes just because we want to make sure that data integrity is
Yeah.
there. But we actually have in the backlog a lot of items where we can add back because we've already thought through, okay, this is how we can add being able to modify this. Like being able to, for example, modify the props for your component is one very common aspect in which you would have to do. So right now it's limited in how you can modify them, but we have some of the foundations in place for that. So we are, for example, versioning props that we've seen for components. So we can then provide
Oh yeah.
ways to essentially upgrade to a new schema of props in there.
Okay.
And that's an
Or-
approach that we're taking to not just component props, but the essentially different aspects in which you would have to modify something that was first committed to and then later on
Yeah.
needs to be changed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, again, I apologize because those are a little bit more nitty-gritty than usual, but there are things that have been on my mind, so it's good. I'm cautiously optimistic with your answers that,
Yeah.
we'll have solutions for these, but they are things that I deal with, if not daily, at least monthly with most of my clients trying to figure out how to manage these situations. So having good multilingual support is one of the key selling points for Drupal, and so if we lose that for kind of a new key feature, that's something I'll have to be aware of when I'm
Yeah.
selling when
So
I'm selling Experience Builder.
in the vein of hard hitting questions, when do you think, if you had to guess, multilingual support for Canvas will be available?
I would guess some point, probably Q1 2026. I would say that's probably
Okay.
roughly
We will hold you
it's
to
pretty
that.
close.
You
It's
can
That
pretty soon
never
roadmap after.
Okay.
that's an acceptable answer for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, none of those questions were surprising to me. Like I've
Yeah,
like I feel like you were summarizing a lot of the pain and frustration that I listened from many of those sessions that
yeah.
I had. Maybe with the exception that you did not complain about the amount of effort you have to put into improving the experience. That was probably what I spent the most time listening to. But
Yeah, it's
otherwise,
it's a lot
that
of effort.
checks.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort, but probably because I'm not the agency. Well, probably because the agencies are usually paying me to improve that. So for me, that's part of my bread and butter, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Making that experience better. But if we can focus those efforts on other areas, we can make Drupal better, and it's better.
yeah,
I'd rather not be rebuilding the wheel for every client. So I'm
yeah.
excited to move on from having to do that. But yeah, I guess the questions weren't in the show notes, so you just didn't have a direct preparation for it. So anyway, we can move on. So there was one of the, I don't even know if I would call this a selling point, but one of the flashier things that Dries demonstrated in a recent Dries note was utilizing AI to build out a component in Canvas. How close is that to actual reality? And I know that he built that on a real demo, like, it's not, but there's a sometimes a far cry between what works in even a real demo and what works in real life and real environments. How far away are we from utilizing AI in that type of situation? Is it something that works most of the time, never, always?
Yeah. So I think we've worked a lot to try to make that vision reality. Where I say that why I say try is because it sort of defining success there is very subjective, right? Because of getting to some level of quality was pretty easy, but then improving the quality from there on, trying to get significantly better results is where it gets very tricky. And defining where, like, setting a definitive line where that line of success is very hard. I would say
Yeah.
where we are right now is where I'm utilizing the AI tools that we have in there myself, and I find that more than 9 out of 10 times what I got out was useful. It accelerated what I was about to do.
Hmm.
I think going from 0 to 100 with what the AI does is not like, that's not reality at all. Like, I think 0 out of 10 times did I get from 0 to 100 with what the AI did. And the
Okay.
goal that we've essentially, like, the vision that Dries has is that we have these agents that can fully autonomously complete the tasks. If that's the goal, which we're trying to hit to, we're not there, and it's still us trying to get to that level of quality.
Well,
So,
But
so I
how
don't
far are
I
how far
don't
are
think
you
that
sorry,
hold on.
sorry, John.
I don't so I don't, I
Uh,
mean, I don't think that the 100%, right, autonomy is the goal, right? Because the AI initiative is very much like human in the loop, right?
Yep.
So I mean, but I think like 95%, right? Where the
Yeah.
human is the last checkbox, if you will.
Yeah, obviously, like, the mistakes is a different part where even humans make mistakes, right? Like a review, I'm
True.
not saying we are excluding reviews from the process. What I mean is that you could expect that the quality is similar to getting from a human who
Yep.
also makes mistakes as
Got it.
they work. As in, like, you could somehow compare that you could tell it, you could not tell it apart from a human doing the work.
Got it.
Uh,
and how far are we getting then? So if you're using your scale of 0 to 100, are we at 60%, 80%, 20%? How far is it accelerating you along that path at the moment?
so that's a hard question because it depends where your skill set is. I think for me,
Mm.
because if I'm a front end developer, for example, when generating components, I think it's actually doing a lot of the boilerplates, and I can do the nitty gritty of getting it to where we need very
Yep.
fast in
Okay.
there. So for me, I would say it's probably like 70-80% where we are of the effort because it sets up so much of the boilerplate for me, and I can just, like, hammer through the rest. But
So
for someone who is not like a front end developer, I would say that they wouldn't necessarily even find it useful for them because it's not really doing the hardest part, which is to try to make it match the design for them.
mm,
Yeah.
So for them, it's very hard for me to then say, oh, for them, how much is it actually of use for them?
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
still very much need a front end
that's
developer
interesting.
as part of the process to get to that level of finesse that you want
So
to get. With
just
content creation, it's a bit different because if it's not about the technical ability of it, it's more about pure quality of what it provides. And I would say that there, actually, it's providing better results than for the components. Obviously, the
Oh,
problem is much
interesting.
smaller because of it's just using components that are in the component library to create a page, and there's just a finite set of things that you would essentially do usually
so
in there.
two questions, one point of clarification and one additional question here, right? So in the Dries note, right, they take an image and they say, "Hey, AI agent, build this component for me." You're saying with some help from you who knows code, knows CSS, you can get to 100%, and there is AI that will be able to do that, or it can do that currently?
Do you mean is there AI that can do the 100%? out
No,
there.
no, I mean, like, is there AI that can get you to that 80%? You
Yes.
said yes. Okay.
Yes,
So
that's what we have today.
that's
So
cool.
the challenge is that it kind of takes broad strokes from that image and
Sure.
implements a component using those. So it's like when you are front end developer and you really want to actually implement the design, you wouldn't consider that as a good enough because it's just, it put those broad strokes together.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's fair. I mean, I think that's fair. So I think like that's awesome as far as like pushing things forward. Another question I have is you said you have, the AI working with Drupal Canvas. Like, does a demo or a tutorial of this exist anywhere? Because like I feel like I would like to see that and just kind of like play with it, help out with building that if it's possible.
I'm sure we will have demos by October at Dries Note, maybe some even before then. Yeah, we haven't done an updated demo recently
Got it. Okay. So
on it.
videos are in the works. Got it.
Videos are
Under-
in the works for sure.
Understood.
We've just started prepping for Dries Note.
Awesome.
Okay.
I mean, the DrupalCon Vienna Dries note is gonna be, and not to steal an Appleism, but it's gonna be the best Dries note yet. So more of less of a Drupal canvas question and more of maybe a future stargazing sort of hypothesis question, but like how do you think that Drupal canvas is going to empower site builders and move the Drupal community forward in the future?
I hope that we can bring us together on one solution and build around it, similar to how Drupal core has done. So one of the challenges we had with Layout Builder and Paragraphs is that it's sort of a disjointed. It's a fragmented community where there's like so many different solutions and like micro modules that exist around it, which in a way is very fascinating to see happen. But as someone who is actually trying to get started and set up that initial experience is not necessarily, it's not very easy to get started.
Mhm.
So I hope that it brings us together and it sort of raises all the boats in the sense that we can grow the community by making it easier for people to join our community because we make it so easy for people to get started. I think how I measure success for this is are we going to grow the amount of site builders that we have in our community? If we manage to grow the amount of site builders we have in our community, I think, and Drupal Canvas are able to help with that. That's what success looks like to me.
That's awesome. Laurie, thanks for joining us. As always, it was super interesting and an all around a great conversation.
Thank you.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on social media with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our show hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
Do you, yes, you listening right now, want to be a guest on Talking Drupal or our new show, Talking Drupal Cafe? Click the guest request button in the sidebar at talkingdrupal.com.
You can also promote your Drupal community event in Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
You can get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the Become a Patron button.
All right. Laurie, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, talk about Drupal Canvas or any of the other cool stuff you're doing, like Acquia Source, where could they go about doing that?
You can find me with Lauri with three eyes on pretty much all the different platforms, or on some platforms I'm just Lauri Timmanee. That's sort of my less Drupal facing name.
There you go.
Yeah. Feel
Nick,
free to reach out on Slack or wherever you find me.
there you go. Nick, what about you?
You can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixman, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me at picozzi.com or on social media and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And if you've enjoyed listening, We've enjoyed talking. See you guys next week.
Have a good one, everyone.